All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. Today we are talking with popular blogger and author Justin Taylor about his new book, The Final Days of Jesus, which is out now and will be especially helpful during Lent and coming up to Easter. And we're going to talk about the book in a sec here, but first let's talk a little bit about Justin. Justin, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Matt. Work at Crossway Books. Work in the book publishing side of things here. I'm an elder at New Covenant Bible Church.
Okay.
And my wife Lee and I have 3 kids and do some blogging on the side. And once in a while try to put together a book. So Final Days of Jesus is
Great.
co-authored with Andreas Kostenberger, New Testament scholar.
Excellent. Well, everyone probably is familiar with Justin's blog, but if you're not, check it out. It's at Between Two Worlds, and it's at the Gospel Coalition, but it's called Between Two Worlds. And Justin and I go back almost 20 years now. We met in college, and we got real interested in apologetics and theology together, which very much relates to Justin's new book here. We even started a website together on GeoCities, which no longer exists, and Justin would put links to the best theological and apologetics articles on the site, and I would post the articles, the theological and apologetics articles that I was writing. So during college, in the very early days of the web, we did a website together, and it was Justin's idea to do the website. He's always been on the front edge of technology, and he started blogging when blogging was really in its infancy. So now, Justin, and you'll remember in college we actually did a Harmony of the Resurrection accounts.
I do, yeah.
And we went to see William Lane Craig debate, and I still remember you walking up to him and giving him our article. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. You know, I don't think he ever responded to it or published or mentioned it in a debate, but hopefully he still has a copy.
Hopefully he still has a copy. That's right. I remember it was so funny. It was. He was gracious. He was gracious, and that was after we kept asking questions about, because we were learning theology. We were asking about how did Satan sin, and he wanted to get more questions from some seekers, I think. So, a little awkward there. Well, Justin, I want to say a few things about your book. What I really liked about it, a couple things. First, thank you for doing it. It's a huge service to the church, so we really appreciate it.
Thanks.
So here are 2 things especially I like about it. First of all, it makes the events very real. So you and Andreas, you retell the story very well, and it was meaningful and especially great to have your theological insights in the midst of retelling the events. And then the second thing is, though you're not footnoting scholarly articles everywhere, I know you're a reliable guide because I know both of you, well, he's a professional New Testament scholar, but I know both of you have substantial background in New Testament studies and apologetics. And so I know you're speaking from a very informed point of view, and even though you're not trying to footnote all of that, it really comes out in the things you say. So,
well, thanks, man. I appreciate the encouragement.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. And I should say also, I like this book better than Bill O'Reilly's Killing Jesus.
Okay.
I actually read that in Barnes & Noble a couple months ago. I came across it. I said, oh, mine as well. And it was an engaging book. I enjoyed it, but I like yours even better. So.
Well, thanks. Yeah, Andreas reviewed it for the Gospel Coalition.
Oh, yeah?
And he thought it was better than he expected it to be.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Bill O'Reilly, if you're watching, hope you're not offended by Matt's comment.
I'm sure Bill O'Reilly's watching. I'm sure he reads my blog every single day. So, all right. Well, let's get to some of the questions, Justin,
Sure.
And learn a bit more about your book. So, first of all, Justin, tell us about the book.
Yeah, it's designed to build on the best scholarship, like you said, but we want it to be real accessible. Okay. So pastors could read it, but also individuals, small groups, families, Sunday school classes. Yeah. In other words, this is not a technical piece of New Testament scholarship. It's designed to be an accessible guide to this final week of Jesus' life. Okay. You know, a number of commenters, it seems everybody who writes on the Gospels comments that the Gospels look like passion narratives, focus on this final week with an extended introduction. Mm-hmm. So if the Gospels are at the heart of the Christian faith, the passion narrative, that final week of Jesus' life, takes up the bulk of the space devoted to the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. So we wanted to put all of the Bible text in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the issues when you're reading the New Testament is that you've got 4 different accounts. And it's hard to be kind of flipping back and forth and seeing how they compare and contrast. Mm-hmm. And then there's not these kind of precise time markers in the New Testament. So we wanted to arrange it in a day-by-day format so you could see what happened just on Palm Sunday, what happened on Monday, what happened on Tuesday, all the way up through Last Supper and Good Friday and Saturday and then Easter Sunday. Then we wanted to add commentary, throw in some charts, maps, diagrams, glossary, just make it as user-friendly as possible. But at the end of the day, our big hope is that people would just focus their eyes on Christ. Andreas and I are just 2 individuals seeking to interpret and to be accurate about these events, but ultimately we want people encountering Christ in his word. So that's why we've included in this book everything that you'll read in the Bible about the final week of Jesus' life. It's in this book in that chronological harmony format.
It's great. And I really appreciate that harmony format and the day by day. That's really helpful. So tell us, why did you write this book?
We really want people to encounter Christ. We want them to be helped. We want it to be a resource that illumines and helps to make sense of Scripture. Yeah. The first target audience I had in mind was pastors and leaders who might be teaching this, leading others. This is a very familiar story. Every spring, every Easter, we come back to the same story. We hear sermons on it. What would it be like if we stared at the story more intensely for a longer period of time with some help, with some guidance? So we really just want to help people encounter the story that you've heard 1,000 times, maybe in a fresh way that you haven't done before.
Yep, that's great. And certainly that's been my experience with the book. So now, Justin, when all of us go through suffering, a lot of times the question we ask is, where is God? Or when we hear about the tragic suffering of others, we say, where was God?
Yeah.
This book is about the suffering of God's own Son. So the question is even more poignant. So let me ask you, Justin, in the midst of Jesus' suffering on Holy Week and in the crucifixion, where was God?
Yeah. Well, the Father is with the Son through all of the parts of the story. As Jesus is cleansing the temple, he's doing that because his Father's honor is at stake, and the Father is with him by the Spirit as he's cleansing the temple, as he's cursing the fig tree, as he's engaging in controversies with the Pharisees, as he's eating his final meal with his disciples, with his friends. The Father's with him as he goes into the garden, and as he's sweating so profusely that it's maybe even blood coming down his face. The Father is with him as Jesus the Son is crying out in anguish to the Father. The Father is with Jesus as he's being betrayed and as he's taken away and as he's going through these Roman and Jewish trials and being flogged and being led to the cross. But we also have to acknowledge that as Jesus is hanging on this tree, cursed under Jewish law, the Father has also forsaken him. He is turning his back on him. This is part of this mysterious nature of the Trinity that in some sense the Father, by divine agreement, by the covenant that they have agreed upon from eternity past, the Son is absorbing the wrath of the Father as he is taking upon himself the punishment that all of us deserve. So he's with him every step of the way, but he is forsaken for a time. And the good news of all of that is that Christ's forsakenness means our acceptance, that we get to receive the righteousness and the eternal presence of the Father with us because Christ was willing to bear the reproach of his own father in this wonderful, glorious, horrific substitution that is at the essence of Christian salvation.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're saying God was sovereign over all of this. Is that right?
Yeah, all of it. Acts 2 and Acts 4 make clear that Judas and Pontius Pilate and the Jews are all fully responsible, and yet they're ultimately carrying out God's eternal will, that it's been predestined, it's been predetermined.
Yeah.
Luke uses that very language in Acts. So this is all under God's sovereign control. There's no plan B. Nothing is going haywire. God is not wringing his hands, upset with what they're doing to his son. They're fully responsible, and yet God is fully sovereign every step of the way.
That's good. What can we learn about our own suffering when we look to Jesus' suffering, and especially how can your book help us in our own suffering?
Well, as Christians who go to church regularly and read the Bible regularly, I think terminology like take up your cross daily sort of become bumper sticker-ish. They sound like cliches after a while. Just, we need to take up our cross. I think the more we get close to the story, the more we read it afresh, the more we don't just hear retellings of it, but actually look at the exact wording of Scripture, the more serious that calling is, that we are to imitate Christ in his cross-bearing as he carries the cross till Golgotha. Yeah. That's a picture of the Christian life. Jesus is very clear, even though I think functionally most of us spend the majority of our times trying to get around this, that a disciple is not going to be treated any better than his master. We have no reason to expect that we are going to be more accepted, more liked, have things easier than Jesus, the only perfect man who ever lived, who walked in perfect communion with the Father, suffered more than anyone else. That's part of our calling as a Christian. This is what it means to follow Jesus. We follow him not just on walks along the beach as the sun is setting. We are following him to Calvary. And so the Christian life is more than just imitation of Christ. It first requires that we be united to him through his sacrifice, but the essence of the Christian life, building upon that, is imitating him in his sufferings. And so the way our book can help, I think, is that it's just putting the Bible in front of you and having you stare at Jesus, to behold him, to see him as he is. And as 2 Corinthians 3 and 4 says, that the more we behold him, the more we become like him. That's the goal of the Christian life, is to be transformed into his image. So, again, that's why we put the whole Bible text in there to point ultimately to the source.
That's helpful. And it's really interesting. You mentioned some of these very biblical truths become almost like bumper stickers to us. Take up your cross, and we almost treat them like cliches and buzzwords. But what I've found, and I experienced this even in reading your book, I think the reason we dismiss certain things as cliches, it's not because we've grappled with those truths, it's because we've only treated them on a superficial level. What I've found is, through reading your book, for example, it has shown me more fully what it meant for Jesus to bear his cross that final week, and then take up your cross became not a cliche anymore. So in other words, the solution to the bumper sticker cliche problem is not to dismiss concepts, but to actually learn what they really mean and learn a little more. And your book is one great way that we can do that in relation to bearing the cross as Christians. So that's good. Justin, let me ask you this. Why did the leaders kill Jesus? What was going on there?
Yeah, I think the simplest answer, and I think this is an answer that applies not just to the religious Jewish leaders, but also to the Roman leaders, and also to the common people who wanted Jesus crucified, is that he was a threat. And he was a threat at pretty much every level. Some people their eyes were opened and they saw Jesus for who he was. They saw that he was the long-promised Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
But for others, I think he was a threat politically to the Roman system.
Okay.
He was a threat religiously to their understanding of what it meant to worship God. That Jesus was essentially saying the people who know the most actually know God the least.
Mm.
It was a threat financially for them.
Mm.
I mean, it has financial implications if you're going to follow Jesus. It was a threat to their physical well-being and health, as we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
This is essentially a call that says, come, follow me, be like Simon here, Simon of Cyrene, who is going to physically carry the cross till Golgotha, to join himself in the mocking and the physical suffering, to be taken away from his family, as his two boys look on. This is a call to suffer and to put to death all that we originally hold dear, all that is not ultimately coming out of the gospel. So, there's a more detailed answer than that, and we get into a little bit of that in the book. But at the end of the day, I think Jesus posed a profound threat to their way of life and to their whole worldview.
Yeah.
And when you mess with someone's idol, the most efficient and effective way to take care of it is to kill that person. So they literally, in rejecting the message, killed the messenger.
Wow. That's powerful. That's one of the things your book did for me, too. It brought out in a new way what was going on. I felt like I understood more clearly really the decision Jesus was requiring of them. They either had to accept his way or they were going to kill him because they hated it so much. There wasn't room for them both, in a sense. He was really making messianic claims. He's the king. He either acknowledged that and they didn't want to, and so they got rid of him. But then what happened? What happened on the third day?
Yeah, I mean, we see this glorious triumph from the grave. Yeah. And again, our familiarity with the story, we know how the story ends. Yeah. So it's a little bit like watching a movie that you've seen the ending 1,000 times. Yeah. And I think this is why it's important to get yourself back into the story. We're not just people looking at this story from a distance, but we're actually, as it were, characters in the story. And so hopefully going through the book and going through these events in sort of a day-by-day format helps to put you back there of what would it have been like to be there on Saturday and to think, am I the biggest fool in the world? Was Jesus wrong? Was he self-deluded? Am I going to get killed for following him? How is this story going to end? Jesus had told them how it's going to end, but existentially, as they are in prayer and in hiding on that Saturday between Good Friday and Easter Sunday, they didn't know for sure how it was going to end. And so I can only imagine the incredible confusion mixed with euphoria when they actually saw Jesus for the first time, were able to put their hands in his wounds and to hear him speak and to see him eat fish and to see this is not a ghost, this is not a hallucination. The man, God, Jesus Christ, has risen triumphantly from the grave, never to die again. And so, as Paul, who at this point is not a fan of Jesus, who will murder and persecute, Paul will eventually teach us that we're not only united to Christ in his sufferings, but one day we'll be united to him in his resurrection as well, so that as we follow Christ to the cross, we will also follow him out of the grave, triumphing over Satan and over death itself. The sting is no more because death becomes the entryway into glory.
That's good. You mentioned at the end of the book that Jesus' work still continues. So what's Jesus doing right now?
Yeah, I talked earlier about how sometimes the familiarity of the story means that we're just so used to it. Well, this is an aspect of the story I think people aren't familiar with. They don't think about very often. What is Jesus doing now? Some people forget that he is still incarnate, that he's still God and man, that he still has a human body, that when he comes again, he will be the God-man Jesus Christ. They forget that he's still working. He's active right now. He's ruling, he's reigning, and he'll continue to do that until all the enemies are put under the footstool, where he'll rest his feet upon as he sits upon the throne. But he's also interceding for us. He's our advocate. He's our defender. It's not because God the Father isn't convinced, but because he's told his son, this is the role I want you to play until I bring all of my people home, for you to keep kind of reminding me, as it were, keep interpreting through the Spirit these prayers that come up to the throne of grace. So he's actively working on our behalf. If we're in Christ, he's praying for us even now.
Well, that's really fantastic. And that's a very encouraging note to end on. So, Justin, thanks so much for writing your book, and thanks a lot for your time today.
My pleasure, man. Thanks. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much. And everyone, make sure to, again, check out Justin's blog. And, of course, get a copy of the book. It really would be worthwhile. So, everyone, go to Amazon and pick this up, The Final Days of Jesus.